Hello there, and welcome to the value of everything. We are going to look into the world of metaphysics. Now, don't run away just yet. It is kind of interesting, and it does explore the nature of our reality and asks us those big questions. So let's just try and throw. I'm just going to throw questions up more so than anything else, and maybe just have a little bit of a ramble next to them. But you'll see what I mean. It is kind of interesting how we get some fairly good. What's the word? Ideas and thoughts which bounce off questions of, and here is my show topic in a second before people like to do U-turns on roundabouts and it's quite kind of confusing. Here is let me just say. So here is the question of the day and the show topic. What defines who we are? What defines who we are? Now, that's a really interesting question. Well, at least from my perspective. And it's interesting because then it gives us a very reflective view of how we perceive ourselves, and so it gives us certain measurements as well, certain meter sticks in terms of, loads of different things it gives us meter sticks in to describe the nature of our reality and who we are, questions of who we are, and what the definition is of who we are. Now, I guess when we say what defines who we are, we're looking for certain measurements. So these are like how you would rate yourself, or how you would define, or how you would describe yourself, and this gives us some kind of explanation of our own identity. And it's really good for a lot of people that just obviously live day to day, and they just get tangled up in the world, and they're very reactionary, and they're not taking too much time to just think and ponder the nature of themselves or their reality, or where they're going, what their goals are, what their long-term future is. And it does definitely give you some very rewarding questions. And if one of these questions you can ask of yourself, and then you think, okay, well, maybe I'm a little bit lost here, and maybe I need to tackle this question a little bit further. I need to sort of delve a bit deeper onto this question. Maybe that gives you certain direction, gives you a certain signal in your life to maybe be a little bit more proactive, be a little bit more set certain goals in your life, and potentially even change your life. But obviously, this is all, as a philosopher, I want this to be your own voluntary decisions that you make, and you tackle this with your own with your own mind. You can set or determine certain goals in your life, and potentially just obviously set certain measurements in your life of how you'd like to be rated. One of the things that I would like to be, which is one of the key factors or the key measures, is for me is not necessarily I don't think even really my status hasn't got too much to do with it. My wealth hasn't got too much to do with it. It is my happiness. I would love to be as happy as possible. And I will strive to achieve long-term happiness as far as I can, to achieve that end as much as I can. And the question is what, obviously a lot of things that will happen, but beyond that point is, how do I achieve happiness, and yada yada yada. You got a lot of deductive reasoning beyond that point, but it's good to ask these type of questions, because it gives us some beautiful directions, which people come out of the schooling system, people come out of families, and they are totally lost. They've got no idea what on earth to do, And the real question is not to them. Oh, what do you want to do with your life? Is for them to ask questions of themselves. To ask them questions. Oh, what do you ask questions of yourself, like what defines who you are, blah blah blah, blah. And that gives them directions as to what kind of career that they want to pursue, or what kind of ultimate goal that they want to pursue. And it is a beautiful thing. So I'm going to go through a few options for us, and what could potentially define who we are. Some of them, obviously, you can just apply a little bit of deductive reasoning to them, and obviously it doesn't necessarily say, okay, well, this doesn't really define who we are, but at least it just gives us a few little options and little thoughts and little corridors just to bounce a few more ideas from. So, what defines who we are? Our potential? Now, that's a real interesting thing. Now, I think everybody sits there and thinks, oh, some people don't, maybe some people that have got like a thing, but I think I've thought in my time that I've had a lot of potential. I know that school teachers have said Charles has a lot of potential, but he doesn't really apply himself. So yeah, there is all of these little things which occur, and what am I to say? Our potential, okay, is an important factor in our lives. It obviously is the one of the drivers to say, okay, well, I think that I potentially could do that, and I potentially could accomplish that with a certain degree of discipline, or with the tools that I have in my hand. But where we say the word, what defines who we are, I guess we're looking at are is more of a present word rather than what we could be. So it's really like a past tense. You would a future tense word you're using there with potential, and the question of who defines who we are is more of like a present sense of really the question. So that's probably not really the right question, and it's deducting that thing is incorrect. But even so, our potentials, you could say, if you was trying to sort of whim it and you had to really just argue that end of potential, is you could say, yeah, well, there is certain things. You are gifted with certain genetics, you are gifted with certain environmental factors, which can give you a certain level of accomplishment in your environment. Therefore, we could say that potential does have a good application in our lives. It is maybe that thing that says, I always love the thing where you watch somebody do something, and you probably watching me doing this podcast and think, I probably could do a better job than him. And that's something where your ego kicks in, and your ego is obviously one of the things that sort of highlights you to your potential, and you go, I'm definitely capable of that. I'm definitely capable of this. I'm definitely capable of all of these number of things. So it's a combination of our ego, and really, like, the ego will give us. Sometimes there's theories that our ego gives us a heightened view of what our potential is, and then sometimes depends on the person usually, but the ego does have a good impact into things that we can accomplish. The ego will say, okay, oh yeah, this is easy, and then potentially the ego can give us a good sort of grounding into introducing us into maybe that sport or that discipline. But the ego is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Once the ego can give us the motivation to jump into a certain discipline, it can sort of get quite defeatist when it finds out that it's going to take a lot more work, and you are not really that accomplished as what you believe you are. So always be wary of that ego. You can obviously, if you have that ego sort of sculpted in a certain manner to say, oh, this ego will say, yeah, you do have the potential to do this, but it's going to take you a lot of effort. then you have molded your ego into a very special tool which knows that certain things or most things is going to take a lot of work and effort to get to the actual attainable goal. So, very interesting factor. Potential is not really the measurement of us, but it can be a very useful tool in terms of how what's the word? Of like really unlocking ourselves or really getting to a defining point of who we are, but it's really like that's really the first step before we achieve becoming who we are. So I just touched upon that thing lightly. I just said who we are born to. Now, okay, I think with a high degree of correlation there, if we are born to middle-class parents, there is a very high probability that you will be middle class for the remainder of your life. As would it be if I was born into a family that was collecting welfare, as also if I was born into a family of incredible riches. Oh, now, I think there's a certain little factor either side of that. So there's one factor in terms of if you're born into an incredibly rich family, I think there's probably a little bit more of a driver to pull you down because you really do need to work hard to at least build your wealth. And if you do not feel like you're accomplishing anything, then you're just maintaining your wealth. And if you're trying to live the lifestyle of your parents and you're not really improving your wealth base or anything like that, then you've got a good chance of retreating back down to the middle classes. As do, I would say, you've got another little counteracting factor where you're born into a particularly poor family. And if you're listening to this podcast, then you've probably got a good chance of obtaining a little bit more of a route out of the bottom classes, and because you're obviously just exploring the nature of your reality and asking great questions. So, and then you've got good potential of working hard. You don't have to work for too much money at all. So you're very competitive against other workers, and you can probably quite easily adapt yourself into the middle classes. So yeah, you can say with a certain degree of fact. I know that obviously if you've got lots of wealth, then you've got a lot more tools to start businesses, but if you've got all that wealth, potentially you've got a lot more risks as well, and you might be very risk averse. Some people just don't like taking on risk, and especially if you get burnt a few times. Whereas if you're a very poor person, it doesn't really matter if you get burnt because you're already at the bottom of the heap anyway. So who we're born to, obviously on a statistical level, on a mathematical level of who we are born to, it does probably correlate to who we would become, but it's not really true in the sense of who we actually are, because obviously we do have a certain thing called free will, and we can choose to get out of the ruts that we're in, or we can choose to build in the basis. We can be prudent, we can be frugal, we can choose not to spend so lavishly, and we can choose to aspire to a higher degree of wealth, or a higher degree of entrepreneurialism or industrialistness. So you can the definition of who we are born to doesn't really represent who we are. I don't like if I was born to very rich parents or very poor parents, it doesn't really necessarily matter. It's really the words that I describe to you, or how you perceive me. It's not really whether I've got a silver spoon in my mouth or whether I've been using a wooden spoon. It really just matters about what I say, how I act, whether the questions that I ask or the answers that I give really relate to you and does have some kind of resonance of truth to you and how you perceive me, which really matters. And it doesn't really define, well, my background doesn't really define who I am. And it's very hard because where you class people in the past, basically my family the word is probably working class, which would be just the kind of my family's a like sort of defining who I am, if this is any sort of definition to you, is just basically like working class, the very sort of labourers, menial tasks, little secretaries, things like that. So it's sort of like the working class, the middle working class, I think. If you could define anything, it's not really like the middle class of the Victorian era of like doctors and highly educated people, but it's more so of just like hardworking, slightly manual, slightly officey based classes. But at least I guess my family did dust themselves off. They had hard days at work and they still went to work. So I guess maybe to a certain degree that continues me in doing my podcasts and my dealings in my general activities day to day. But it should not define who I am. So another one, obviously, is I'd like to go to the past and the future. Again, you could say I've just touched upon who we are born to. Obviously, that is your beginning of life. So if you think of a prince being born into the royal family, obviously you have got a great beginning of your life, or you've got a good characterization of who it defines who you are. But you still can be some crazy prince, you can be a load of different characters, so it doesn't necessarily mean who you are. But there's obviously that aspect of who we are born to. Another question is, or another answer is, who we are surrounded by, or the lives that we are affected when we die. And I think there is a little bit more truth around the death side of things. So your beginning doesn't define really you, but I guess the way that things end, has been a certain course that has been taken with your sailing upon the seas, and you have decided to choose your partner. You have chosen to have a family to a certain degree, to have friends that surround you, to choose a certain occupation, to choose the sort of hobbies, the lifestyle, everything that you've led to until you've met your end. I guess you could say that once you've met your end, I guess there are certain genetic factors which come into the equation of how you die and things like that. So that, I guess, isn't necessarily like the definition of you, but there is certain elements of truth around the way that in which you've who you're surrounded by on your deathbed defines who you are. I guess there is a certain element of how many people go to your funeral, but I guess you could say that if you're a very rich man and there's some kind of little culture of make sure that you show your face or you're not going to get this business dealing, I guess that doesn't really show that really that is a good measure about who you are. And I guess another thing is that obviously if you've got a big family all surrounding you on your deathbed, but you're a very rich man, then you could also say that could be they're all looking for inheritance. So it's not necessarily the measure of you to see how you're surrounded on your deathbed or anything like that, but I guess maybe a little bit on the touching of the conversations, the tears that roll down the cheeks. You could potentially have crocodile tears. I guess it is where we say a lot on this existential perspective of your death. It doesn't really make too much sense, but I guess there is there is a reflective point in time. I guess it all, not necessarily what you're surrounded by upon your death, but the thoughts that are shooting into your head upon your death is probably the interesting point, because then you're thinking to yourself, "Ooh, I have really had," you could say, "Oh, I had a lot of potential and I've squandered it, and I've chosen this life that's led to this point. I really would have done things differently in the past. I've made some incredible mistakes. I wish I would have chosen the path of virtue instead of pursuing all this money, and I've really didn't spend as much time with my kids as I really wish I could have. The regrets that lay heavy on my heart now that I'm dying." All of these kind of things maybe is a little bit of a measurement and a definition of who you are. And maybe it is. Remember one of the old classic sayings of your life could be a signal to others to not make the same mistakes as you. So there is a little bit of a truth in there, but the truth actually lies within your skull and not necessarily in the outside world of the way in which you're dying. So it's an interesting perspective. Definitely an interesting question to ask about the deathbed, and the deathbed situation is always very interesting to me. I always wonder when I get to that point, will I say, I always think in my head, I'll start to think, I wish I'd really pushed myself a little bit harder. I wish I'd really thrown myself into the deep ends. I wish I would have just gone to the. I always think about this in a few years in my past, where I thought I wish I had just made a little bit more of those riskier decisions, see what would have happened. I think I would have probably been able to handle a lot of harsh situations, but I've avoided harsh problems in the past, and I wish I would have made it a little bit. I would have made things a little bit harder and tougher in the beginning, and the fruits of my labour would have probably flourished a little bit further down the line. But can't really do too much about that now, and what you got to really do is focus on the day-to-day things and really just try and push yourself as much in your own potential. So I'll move on from death, and I will go on to another interesting point. How others perceive us. Now, we are looking. It's a very interesting thing. Now, does that define who we are? Now, that's. I remember always seeing those sort of questions, or you get that in job interviews, how would somebody else rate who you are? And it's a good psychological sort of question: how others perceive you, how others think of you, and is that a good measurement of us? Now, let me think about that. Now, obviously, perception is a very key thing, and perception is something that you can play around with quite rapidly. I can put on a very flashy designer suit and drive around in a Mercedes-Benz, and people will perceive me as some very wealthy man and treat me in a certain way, but really, are they being very natural, or are they being very, really, is it defining who I am? It's not really defining who I am. Nobody has got any sense of what my character is. Nobody's sort of seeing any of the virtues that I have displayed. They are only seeing potentially that I may have done something of value for somebody at some point in the past, but maybe I have defrauded somebody in the past. Who knows how I have accumulated this wealth to achieve this point of perception of myself. So it's not really a point there in terms of how we're perceived, but there again, it's like there's a little bit of a grayness here. So upon ourselves, I choose to wake up in the morning, and I can choose to put on my jogging bottoms and my stained jogging bottoms, and I can walk down the roads to pick up. You don't really pick up the newspaper nowadays, but let's say I go down to the road to pick up a newspaper. People will see me looking all crummy, not really washed my hair, and they'll be like, "Oh, not that I've got that too much hair, but they will be going, oh, he's a little bit ropey. He's not really taking care of himself. I guess that is one of the virtues of people is the way that we present ourselves, the way that we look after our hygiene. It is to a certain degree a measure of ourselves. If we take care of ourselves, then we can take care of others. So there is a light degree of how we are perceived. Obviously, there's a genetic point as well to that. So I could be very ugly, and people are perceiving me in a certain manner or a certain way. They may be perceiving me as a violent criminal. They may be perceiving me as dumb. Who knows what the perception could be if I look very ugly. And I could be looking extremely attractive, and people could treat me in an extra kind manner. And or they could be they could be very flirtatious with me. Who knows what could happen if I'm extremely attractive? So unfortunately I'm not, but it doesn't really define who I am in terms of what my it doesn't really define who I am, really, like what I'm born with, or really the material wealth. But certain things in terms of what I'm in control of, the way that I present myself, the way that I can dress, I can brush my teeth in the morning. I don't necessarily have to have all my teeth falling out. There's certain ways that people can perceive me, and there's a way that my body language can be to see that I'm fairly relaxed. There's a certain way that I can walk down the street and they could say, oh, okay, he's fairly confident, or he's a little bit of a sloucher. So there is means and ways that we can perceive ourselves and have a look and say, right, look at myself in the mirror and think, okay, well, if I'm going to really be presentable to other people, I need to really portray myself in a certain way and certain manner. And there is a certain thing of acting to this, but you're acting to the potential of what you want to be, and that can define who you are. So yes, there is a little bit of a lightness to this, where the way that we're perceived, but the perception is really the portrayal of ourselves and how we are creating and modeling ourselves to other people. I guess we get some feedback at some point. But I mean, I really think that the perception of ourselves and everything else really should. The key driver should be in our virtues. So if I'm wearing that designer suit and I'm driving around in the Mercedes, I mean, I guess you could say there's a certain level of tidiness and neatness and hygiene which is going on there, which is slight peppermints of virtue. But it's not really full degrees of virtue. But if I was walking around fairly just half decently presented, but I was carrying myself with, I looked like I was being very, very friendly, and I was being very confident, and I was looking fairly approachable, and when somebody saw me on the street, I smiled back at them, and I would nod and acknowledge, and I would make eye contact. Then there is a certain degree of perception which is occurring there, which is based upon my own controlling of oneself. And I guess there is a thing of how I am being defined by other people. I won't go too far into this in detail, but there has been studies where even if you have got like a severe disfigurement, but you carry yourself with incredible sort of confidence, and you're very sociable and active, then people will treat you in a very, very nice manner. In fact, much better than if you was extremely attractive. So there's even like scientific backing in a study that proves that where we're disfigured, we control ourselves in certain manners, we get extremely good reactions from other people. Okay, so how others perceive us is a good one. How about who accepts us? So this is an important question. So I could have extreme views. I'm sure I've probably got a few extreme views that you've listened to at some point in time. And yet you are accepting to listen to me. You probably could be disagreeing with me and shaking your head at every stage that I speak, but I guess to a certain degree you're accepting what I'm saying. So you've got a certain level of acceptance for listening to this podcast. I guess who we're born to, they could obviously, my parents could have rejected me at birth and could not have accepted me. So that is probably an important factor that could have definitely changed my entire life. The friends who accept me, so where I went to school, if nobody accepted me whatsoever and they refused to mingle or socialize with me, that is obviously going to have a detrimental factor on me. We are innate social beings, so if I cannot find anybody that accepts me in this world, I think that would be possibly a good definition of who I am. Now, I guess you could say to a degree that certain people attract other people. You can say in some ways a little bit that opposites kind of attract, but really the same sort of groupings, the same sort of moral codes will back, or the same justifications and things, and people that agree that maybe smacking is agreeable and things like that will attract each other. So certain people will accept what I say. Certain people, the people that are listening to this podcast, I think are probably more so inclined to think the same way as that which I do, and they're accepting of what I'm saying, or they're accepting of the questions that I'm asking in life. So I think there is a good point of who accepts us, is a good definition of who we are. Now, obviously, I could have a total mad person who accepts who I am, and also loves to murder people on the weekends. So it's not really that person who agrees with or accepts what I am is really a definition of who I am. But again, I'm going into this little grey world again, but there is the fundamental point of certain people are accepting me. If nobody was accepting me, then obviously that is a major telling sign of who I am, and there is a major problem with what I am doing. And there is a definite point of, what shall I say? There is a definite message which is being brought back upon myself that is defining who I am, that nobody likes you. So I guess that is important. But I guess it's just sort of it's like a slight measuring degree. So certain people that accept you in certain groups, you could be surrounded by a load of arseholes that are not accepting you. So so you might be a very thoughtful person, you might have some fantastic ideas, but people are trapped in this world that don't really want to aspire and achieve next levels in life and things like that, or do not want to ask questions, or do not want to rock the boat, or break the status quo. So whenever you try and ask these questions, or whenever you try and pursue these goals, you get stamped down, and you get unaccepted. You have unacceptable behavior. I guess that can be obviously a negative reaction to who you are, is possibly as well a defining thing of what you are as well. So the people who reject you, the people that reject your ideas, do have, probably I would say even more so than the people that accept you, have a defining aspect as to who you are. And obviously you would really prefer arseholes to dislike you, and then you know that you're on the right track. So, yeah, who accepts us is a good question. I definitely would love you to apply that to your own thinking and see where that takes you. And yeah, and if obviously the person that's not accepting you ask, okay, are they applying all the virtues? Are they the most virtuous person in the world? If the answer is no, then you're probably on the right track. So, or you've not got really too much to worry about. So that's an important question. It's not a definition of who you are, but it does definitely give you certain. It does definitely raise a certain flair up into this woods, and you can navigate through it in a good way. And I sort of made this point after as well. Who opposes us? So your opposition can definitely define who you are. If I'm in a certain political party, if I'm in the Republican Party, and all the Democrats are after me, that does probably define that. They see me as a threat. They see me as a certain person that can take away their wealth or take away their power. So if I am becoming very important, or I'm getting a lot of opposement to my questions or my theories, then there is definitely some people out there that are thinking, okay, well, you are breaking down my thought structure, you're breaking down the power, my control, you are breaking down potentially roots of my wealth, and I am required, or I do really need to oppose you. I may even like you, but I do need to oppose you. So yeah, it's a very interesting point. This is another interesting one. Our knowledge, or like the information that we acquire. So does that define who we are? Right, so if I was raised by a pack of wolves in the woods, the knowledge would be, I'll probably be quite good at foraging and working out how to ambush prey and things like that. I would probably know a lot of things about wolf culture and how to handle myself around wolves. More so than any other human being. I probably would understand where my hierarchy points in the pack would be, where I'll be standing. There'll be all these little interesting factors of the information that I've acquired over that period of time. And I guess to a certain degree, the information that was been taken out. So obviously there is with information, there is input and output. I have to act towards the wolf, and he reacts, or she reacts to me, and that gives me the data. So it is important. Yeah, it is the knowledge and the information has definitely sculpted me into the way that I am being at that point in time. So I would say that there is definite truths in that. However, there is one little thing which I'd like to throw into this point. Now, I have a mind, and obviously all I have been taught at this stage is the language of wolves, or how to act in packs and animals and things like that. And obviously, unless I was looking at my reflection in the water and things like that, I would realise that I'm probably not a wolf, and if I saw other humans nearby and things like that, I would realise that there's probably a little bit more possibility out there for me than what I am doing right now. So the question would be, so there is obviously there is an environmental factor, there is things that are happening, there is potential in me, there's genetics and things like that, which means that I do have obviously potential to be achieve at least acquire tools, be a lot more good with the environment and create things. I could have probably built the walls shelter and all these fantastic things with my mind that can theorize things, but it would have been really that it's not necessarily the information, but if Socrates came down to me at one point and spoke to me in wolf speak to say, question everything and start deducing information and really just asking if everything that you do in your life is the right thing, then I would have been put on to a different track, and rather than being very reaction based and living in the moment, I could have had a little bit more free thought and a bit more free will, and I could have pursued different things, and maybe I'd have looked over at the people and thought, maybe I need to walk over to them and start living in that tribe instead. So you could say that knowledge and information does really apply to exactly who we are, but once we have people in our lives that give us this golden, beautiful thing called free will and the way to think for ourselves and say that you are your own being, you can make your own decisions in your life. If everybody jumped off a bridge, would you do the same? If I was given like really just tools of consciousness, then the information wouldn't really define who I am. The environmental information wouldn't define who I am. If everybody was surrounding me being communist, and I really found out that I possibly the world really required free market libertarianism, then that wouldn't shake my understanding and thinking, because of the information and the books that were out there. I would just have this theory in my mind, and it would steadfast against these communists all surrounding me. So information is an interesting point, but to a degree of where you can apply yourself to conscious thought. So, very interesting point. Knowledge and information, and obviously the actual amount of information that's available to you. So, or the way that you can find and seek out this information. So it might be the first thing that you've ever listened to is this podcast. This might be just like, oh my God, I can actually think for myself. I don't have to live day to day and worry about like the next paycheck. I can start thinking about things beyond that point and really pursue long-term goals and things like that. Once people give you these beautiful little chestnuts of information, and then you can really start to exercise that conscious thought, then it no longer is this sensory data input-output sort of thing, and it now becomes the way in which you acquire information, that you have your free will, that you take on your life in a certain methods, and you ask questions and reason with yourself until you obtain goals that you would like to achieve. So, yeah. Interesting perspectives. I wouldn't say information definitely defines us, but yeah, it is an important factor of the information that we're surrounded by. If we're surrounded by a load of people that thought the world was flat and there isn't really too much information out there, I've got to sort of go with these guys until I can maybe pursue and ask questions of the rate of which this world is flat, and then. Or even if I'd had to find the relevance of whether the world is flat or not. It doesn't really matter too much whether the world is flat or not to me too much. But when I do start going into the scientific sphere and things like that, and if I want to travel out to outer space, I really do need to start working out this information. So application of information is required at certain degrees in our lives, depending on the environment that we're in, or the study and the pursuit that we're taking upon. Okay, I sort of have brushed upon this thing as well, but this again is our own choice, not necessarily other people. I've mentioned about perceivement and things like that, and maybe the deathbed, but the company that we choose. So I guess you could say that we are rated upon the company that we keep. Now, if I hang around with the criminal underworld, and I talk about all the robberies that I've done and all the violent thuggery that I've done in the past, and I drink with them and I talk with them and I get tattoos, and I'm basically them. I have become, and I have defined myself by really surrounding myself with those people and becoming those people. And remember that we are what we repeat. If you start talking in a certain way or manner, and even if you're trying to be in a mockery kind of sense, that will become you eventually, whether you like it or not. If you talk in a certain accent, then eventually that accent will... if you try and mimic an accent or something like that, or you watch Friends a lot and things in that or those type of TV shows, you may start talking that way inclined. So, company that we keep, TV shows, things like that, it is a definition. We are what we repeat. And the company that we choose, at least there is the choice element in this factor. If I'm choosing to surround myself with certain types of people, then that is a definition, I would say, to a degree of who I am, because I've got a voluntary choice at that point. It's not like I'm really forced with this group of people. If I'm forced, people that I work with is people that I work with. But if I hang around with certain people on the weekend, that's my choice. I choose to spend my leisure time with these people, and I find these people to a certain degree entertaining to be with rather than not to be with. So it is a certain definition of who we are. I would say definitely more so than like who accepts us and who perceives us. Things that are our choices are really things of who we are. If I met you and I introduced my friend to you, I would obviously have to think when I introduce my friend to you, to say, okay, well, this person isn't a complete weirdo or a complete murdering psychopath. This is an extension of people that I accept in my life and find them friendly and good people to be around. So when I introduce this person to you, I would obviously hope that that person is very kind back to you and things like that. So there is definite definitions of the people that we surround ourselves with and who we choose to keep company with. Now, if you are in company of people that do bring you down, that is a definition of yourself. You are in some way asking for punishment. You're asking yourself to be surrounded by people that are bringing you down and making you feel depressed. And that is a counteracting, that is a reactionary environment that you're surrounding yourself in. It's something that you can choose. You've got the choice to say, I don't really want to be with you anymore. And you really can just not be with that person anymore. So you do have fundamental choices in your life. You do have voluntary things. You can obviously put injunctions against people if you feel like they are stalking you and things like that. So definitely there is choice in this matter, and where you have choice and you have conscious thought in the decisions that you make, that is a definite position of definition upon oneself. Okay. So yeah, I think that one fits a lot. If you think there's a little bit more of less so points, I guess you could say that there's certain little things like environmental factors that maybe you don't really necessarily have. Well, once I've told you this thing, now you have the conscious thought to think, okay, why am I surrounding myself with these people, where beforehand you may have just been doing it for social pressures and things like that. Or if you're doing it for social pressure or you're doing it for status, then you've got to live with that. But I wouldn't say that's really a route to happiness. But again, that is still defining who you are, because if you are choosing to be with that person because of status, that is really the reflection of yourself. So it is a fascinating thing. Okay, let's move on to the next bit. Let me just do this hard turn, and then I will come back. All right. So our choices and our free will is obviously an important factor here, and our choices and our free will is really a good definition of who we are. Oh yeah, I have covered many of these little things, the little notes that I've written down. Okay, so the environment defines who we are. Now, okay, so an environment does definitely shape as to who we are. I would say a little bit more on the physical side, not necessarily so much on the mind side of things. But yeah, if I am in a totally sun-bleached land, and I've been there for a very long time, and I've been in that tribe for a long time, I'm going to have a lot of melanin in my skin, and that will make me very dark-skinned. There is, yeah, obviously an environmental factor does have a physical effect on our bodies. Now, okay, you could say that the physical effect has a repercussionary effect back upon ourselves. If I'm in a landscape of, this is one of the major definitions where we come to environment. If I live in a land of immense abundance, then I'm going to pursue certain other things instead of storage and farming and things like that. If I've got abundance, scarcity, that's important. If I live on mountains, then I'm going to have a massive chest and I'm going to be able to breathe in more oxygen. If I live in the lowlands, maybe I'd have a smaller chest. There is definite environmental factors which shape who we are. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's really sort of I guess it can for a physical sense, but where I say who we are, I'm trying to say like the content of our character and who we are in displayed in that sort of measure. So yeah, like our physical being. I mean, obviously, everyone's sort of given this physical being, and once you've been in this vessel of this body for a long period of time, this body becomes you, and people perceive you as whether you're this big man or this skinny little man, or whether you're this beautiful woman, or whether you're this fat lady. Who knows who you are? But in that sense, yeah, there is a physical appearance which becomes a definition of you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you that defines who you are. So you could be a beautiful character and still a fat woman. So and you could be like this beautiful, thick character of great honesty and good virtue, yet you can still be a fat lady. So it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of our physical appearance. Now, so the environment is like an interesting factor, I guess. Intellectual environment is probably more so a very interesting thing. So now, if you're in an intellectual environment of mysticism, then you're going to be a little bit screwed up in terms of your reasoning and your empirical data and your sensory data. So you're going to get a little bit sort of taken up with the fairies. Maybe you've got this beautiful belief that your life is going to ascend into this Nevada and things like that, which kind of probably makes you feel a little bit happy. But where it comes to working out certain things like medicines and things like that, and really trying to improve lives and give yourself shelter and labor-saving equipment, it's probably not going to be as useful to you. So again, the environment of thought and reasoning is probably very, very important, and it is a definition of who we are. Now, obviously, I guess a lot of people that are listening to me are in this Western culture, which is taken up in the dogma of consumerism. Consumerism, you must consume and consume these beautiful houses, these beautiful cars, and that will accomplish you to be in this point in status. And obviously there is a certain degree of how that defines who we are, especially if we haven't got conscious thought and how we perceive the environment that we're living in. That definitely can change the way in which who we are. It sort of boils down to the original point that I made in the previous thing about with the wolves. If we were given conscious thought and the ability to think for ourselves, then we can quickly realize and measure that we're in this massive consumerism sort of world, with the church now being replaced with the shopping mall. So it isn't necessarily the definition of who we are. Now, let me just reverse park because I cannot park to save my life. Oh, there's a bloody tin can there. Why can I not park? One sec. Just get the feeling that I'm going to just run over a tin can and then that's just going to blow up my tyre. So I don't think it will, but just a bit of aluminium. All right. Beautiful. Okay, so we have approached the environment. Okay, this is a good one. This is a good one coming up. This is a brilliant one coming up. Nutrition. Now, it is fairly true. Obviously, we can't really do too much about the air that we live in. Obviously, we can go to a little less polluted areas. And we can filter our waters to a certain degree as well, so we don't have to have any toxins in our water and things like that. But one of the fundamental ones is that we are who we eat, or what we eat. So we are what we eat. So we do make life choices, and this obviously is a beautiful one in the application of who we are. I'm not going down the route of fat shaming here, don't worry. But it's just the definition of who we are is really, what we eat. These are conscious. I guess some people don't necessarily have conscious thought and really trying to pursue themselves. I guess a lot of people in today's era know now that sugary foods does mean that you're going to put on a belly, and same for fatty foods, and high fatty proteiny foods are going to give you a fat belly as well. So everyone has that idea, but they know that the pleasure in the moment is so beautiful. I'm definitely not the thinnest man in the world either. I've got a bit of a belly on me myself. Definitely, our nutrition is really who we are. But this is obviously a physical sense. But it can obviously, if we're not given the right nutrients and our brain is not given like the correct omega-3s and the fatty acids and things like that, then it makes us less so and gives us a less ability to think and great things like that. So obviously we can think about nutrition for our brains as well as our bodies and things like that. So nutrition is an important factor. Take care of yourself. It's an important thing. There's lots of information out there. There's lots of scientific studies as to what foods are good for you and what foods are incredibly dangerous for you. It's fairly easy to work out that where you walk through a shopping centre, a supermarket, the first place that you come to with all the fruit and vegetables is probably the place where you want to purchase the most stuff. And then once you go through all the middle aisles, that's all of the high fructose corn syrup, sugared crap, and wheats and all that kind of stuff, which probably doesn't really do your body a whole world of good unless you are starving. So you do have conscious thought, and there's plenty of information out there to really guide you in the way in which you think. I know that sugary foods are beautiful, and I know that higher fat foods are beautiful and crisps taste nice and all these kind of things, but it is a trickery of your mind which is being played, and it really is the accomplishment of your mind over your body. If you can control yourself, I'm probably not the best person of this. I know I can control physical exercise. I can really push myself hard in the gym, but sometimes I find it impossible just to stop myself from walking past that fridge and opening the door and that little glowing light comes on and I'm like enticed into that fridge. So our nutrition, we are what we eat. It is a physical thing, but it doesn't really define our. I mean, if I'm going ridiculous and I'm like feeding myself into a frenzy and I'm like having to be craned out of my room, and so we have to knock down the wall to get me out of the room. This is really the definition of me now. That's all I have become. That is my only motive in life, is just to get a high from eating more food. But it doesn't really define you. It is one of those important things of looking and focusing upon our nutrition just to get the best out of our bodies. But let's move on a little bit beyond that point. So what we consume. So not only do we consume food and air and water and things like that, but we consume entertainment as well, and we consume knowledge, and we consume things that are around us. So, and I guess these are obviously, unless you haven't been given like good tools of conscious thought, but you are really what you're consuming. So, if I choose to watch X Factor all the time, then really that's going to really be the only sort of topic of conversation that I'm going to have with you. Um, or Dancing with the Stars, whatever it is. So what I choose to consume is really what all I am choosing to be. So my consumption of knowledge and the consumption of what I'm becoming really, it does become myself, and I'm choosing to go into. I choose to like read up on economics and politics and philosophy and all these very boring subjects to a lot of people, but I do find that there is an incredible amount of interest. I think these words have been put out there just to bore people off before they even introduce themselves into these subjects. But there is incredible beauty and fascinating things which apply to every sort of stretch of our minds and possibilities when we look into these subjects. So, it's all a lot of it is a lot of smoke and mirrors, and you've got to delve deeper to get to the truth. But it's a fascinating theory of study, and what we consume and our curiosity does define who we are. Now, obviously, if I was brought up in an environment which really smashed apart my curiosity, that thinking was a bad thing, and questioning life and things like that was an incredibly bad thing, and it opposed the status quo, then obviously that does sort of define who I am. But if we nurture and build up beautiful people to be very curious of life, to really ask any questions upon ourselves, we don't really care. Just like we'll delve into the truth of this matter. You can ask questions of myself. There's nothing to fear. Then we have created some beautiful beings that can consume knowledge and really pursue good paths of virtue in the world. Sorry, it's getting to the summer now, so I'm now sitting in a car with the. I think I might actually turn on the air conditioning because it's just getting. Look at me just burning up nature's fuel. Maybe it's worth it with this podcast. Who knows? Okay, so what else have we got? Oh, don't have to turn on that blower too much. Okay, well, I guess that measures back into a very good point, the scarcity of our environment. So, where there is scarcity in our environment, that does definitely indicate certain things of who we are and where we are. So, if I was on a land full of bananas, I probably would build a lot of things out of banana leaves and banana trees, and I would consume a lot of bananas, and that probably might be the basis of my diet. I might just be eating banana and fish and banana and beef with every meal. So I guess, but I guess if everything else was scarce, that does sort of make me think in a certain way. I guess there's like this thing of isolation and this factor of the world that we live in, and if there is scarcity and abundance in certain degrees, that does sort of define our environments. Now, I'm talking about food, which I said is a bit of a physical factor, but there is abundance and scarcity of thought and knowledge and philosophy and conscious thoughts as well. So in the world today, I would say probably there is a scarcity of conscious thought and how to think, and really pursuing ourselves and self-empowerment. And there's abundance of dogma, of consumerism. There is abundance of religiosity. There is abundance of mysticism. There is an abundance of lots of things which can pleasure you in the moment, but not necessarily give you long-term future gained growth. So it is an incredible shaping factor of the world that we live in. I always think that, I always think there's a certain beautiful time in America's stages where they were like real big free market libertarians, creating the smallest state possible, and they really were pushing the envelope in terms of inventions. All the inventors just literally just popped out of America out of nowhere, and they were really pushing the lifestyle of America further and further forward. And that was in a world and a culture which fostered free thinking, and it had an abundance of people, taking risks, pursuing knowledge, reading books, things like that. So, I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create an abundance for that as well. So, that abundance and that scarcity is an important factor, and obviously the people that can find me, the people that can find people that can open each other's minds is like Quaid is incredible. It's incredible, and the more so that we can do that is going to really shape our world into being a better place. So I obviously want an abundance of philosophy and people, a way that can sort of ask the questions of what defines who we are. The more people that can ask those questions, I think we're going to live in a much better world. So it's an incredible thing, and obviously I can't really tap into every single thing of what there is an abundance of and what's there is a scarcity of. I probably can think of some like show topics for later on, but it is a real good environmental factor, and obviously the thing of our psyche is very important. And you just look at sort of the amount of websites that are out there. What is there an abundance of websites out there, and what are there probably too few of? There's a scarcity of websites out there of. It is very important, and it is a definite shaping factor of our minds. And basically, like, okay, I can find a shopping website pretty quickly, but can I find many websites of really asking very deep, thoughtful thoughts? Yeah, I could probably Google it, and probably it would pop up eventually, and there's good search engines which would find this information for me. But sometimes really finding the right questions and the right answers can be incredibly difficult on the internet as well, and searching for them can be like a needle on the haystack, and that is obviously like a world connection for you. So you can see how some things can be very hard and some things can be fairly easy, and that obviously does shape and define a lot of us of who we are. So again, coming back again is like how we're told to perceive the world is very important. So if we are dogmatized in, or we have been provided with dogma of like religion and things like that, that is the world of which we are told to perceive the world. If I was born into a Jewish family, and I was told that this the life and the culture is Judaism, and I was told to believe in that God, that would be my way of thinking, and that will be my cultural belief, and that will be the pursuit of myself. So it is a shaping and defining thing, and the way in which I am given logical tools of how to think. If I am told what to think but not told how to think, then obviously that is a fundamental problem. Our virtue potentially does define who we are, and as does the vice in our world. So our virtue and vice, if I pursue virtues, then that's going to define who I am. That's going to give an incredible amount of theory to us. But also, if I following my vices, if I'm this weird predator in the woods and things like that, that does define who I am. I could be locked up forevermore. Who knows? So it's a very important factor, and I do think obviously the virtue is an incredible definition of who we are. If you look to the virtues, and you look at a list of virtues and you think, okay, how much do I have of this, this, and this, and this, and this? It's really interesting factor. Even if you just look at it as like almost like a mathematical thing, like out of 10, how much do I have of this virtue and things like that? you probably get yourself a score of like what you think you are out of 10 in the virtue category. It'll be quite incredible. And yeah, it is a really important factor of who you are. And obviously, if when you apply virtue, then you get more happiness. And then if you haven't got enough virtue in your life, then you realise that where you are in your terms of happiness scale. And obviously the vices, if I am drinking a load of Coke and if I'm eating a load of chocolate bars, again, yeah, that's going to eventually catch up with me and that will define who I am. So, I'm sorry I'm rushing through these bits now. Another thing would be how we keep ourselves disciplined. Obviously that ties in with the factor of virtue and vice. So if I know that I need to be virtuous, yeah, I don't do too much about it, then obviously that is the definition of who I am. If I can remain disciplined in the way that I pursue, I'm curious and I seek out knowledge. If I am disciplined in my entrepreneurialism and my industrialistness, I will be far more disciplined. I will have performed discipline and I've eventually become that person. So if I train to be a martial artist and I train and become more disciplined, that discipline does define that I am a black belt. So that is incredible. I'm sorry I'm rushing through these points as well. Checks and balance. You could say that I've chosen certain friends in my life that are very geeky, and then I could have chosen friends in my life that are just generally pretty and generally sort of socially squarey people that could be kind of used to in most situations. So where I said about we are defined by the company that we keep. You can sort of give yourself sort of like a ceiling and a floor of the grouping of friends that you surround yourself with, and you can have very violent friends and very non-violent friends depending on the way that you feel every day, but then you've given yourself a certain degree of a check and a balance between certain points, and that could be a definition of who you are. And you are just obviously you may be a social vampire, or you could be sort of very pinpointed in the choosing of your friends to say, I will only choose very kind, friendly people to be surrounded with. So you can have this varying degree of checks and balances, and you can apply that obviously into a lot of things. Our accomplishments. So again, okay, yeah, you could say that our accomplishments are certain defining things. If I have cured cancer, then obviously that is an immense accomplishment, but it doesn't necessarily define who I am. I could be some evil person on the weekends, but yet I could find a cure for cancer at the same time. So it is a little bit of a measurement, but it's not the full definition. And then let's just go through just a little bit more just into our limits, our limitations, and our struggles. The struggles one was the first thing that came into my mind at first. And I think obviously I'm just going to end with this as well. It's just people are obviously given certain hands in life, and you've got your limitations. You've been surrounded by certain people. You've got all these kind of things that may be positives or negatives. But everyone's going to be born with certain imperfections and varying degrees, and people are not going to be able to come to certain things like Dr. Waters because of their physical bodies and their mental capacities and things like that. But if you can, to a degree, overcome these problems and strive to pursue these things and really have the mind over matter to really be accomplished in something. So it doesn't even matter if you've accomplished it to a crappy degree, like, I don't know what the first belt is out of white belt, maybe blue belt, whatever it is. Even if you've done that and it's taken an incredible amount of like toughness and hardness for you to do that and to get up every morning, and you've been come from a totally broken background and everything else, it is an immense accomplishment, much so more than somebody that's just got a black belt from just because he's used to like being disciplined to everything in any sense. So the way that we find struggles in our lives and the way that we overcome them is an incredible feat, and it is a definition. I definitely think that's an incredible definition of who we are. I definitely glorify the Paralympics. I think it's an incredible thing that people can be given hard things in life, or potentially be incapacitated, and then choose to turn things around and turn a negative into a net positive. And that is a definite defining factor of somebody, and it is one of those things that you will definitely smile upon when you are on your deathbed. And I think it's a very strong factor of what defines who we are, and how we have really, our conscious thought has overcome these problems, and we've striven further. And I think that is really, I don't like saying these words too much, but it is the essence of the human spirit, of how we strive and fight and get knocked down, and we have to take on these failures, but then we pick ourselves up and then fight on. If you look at, like, even if you just bring it down to a fight, if you watch a fight and you see two boxers fight, one gets knocked down and then he gets himself up and he fights even harder, your heart just like goes, oh my god, this man has got everything going for him. I really love this person. Everyone loves that. I think that's one of the ultimate virtues of just really picking yourself up from failures. And I definitely think that is a defining factor of who we are. So I will leave you with those thoughts. Definitely great things to work with upon your life. If you've got any other ideas, really share them with me. And yeah, it is a beautiful world we live in, and you and I can, I don't know where I'm going with this, push it further. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and I'll be back for more. Goodbye.